think it's like with everything else, where it does take a little bit of practice at first. So if you say, okay, here's something standing out to me, and just briefly identify it, and then have the follow-up, at least thought or idea to describe where they are. So I think at least at first a little bit of practice. I mean, I think honestly, even just looking at that graph a couple times, you can really kind of get the basics. And yeah, I get it. But really, as you were alluding to, it does take a little bit of practice at first. But then once you kind of get a little bit more comfortable with, immediately picking it out and kind of identifying where they are, it actually does not take up all that much time at all. It's almost kind of like an immediate thing that's just like a little scribble.
Okay, great. So it looks like that is all we're going to have time for as far as questions today. Thank you, Dr. Chapman. So in the interest of time, we'll just end our Q&A session there. And for additional educational materials, I'd like to encourage everyone to visit our website, www.gdx.net. On that site, you'll find sample reports, tip instructions, and other information for all of our profiles by clicking on the Clinicians tab at the top of the page, or by logging into your MyGDX account, or clicking on the Learn Now link on the home page. Due to the upcoming holidays, please visit our website for information about closures and shipping instructions. After taking advantage of the materials found on our website, feel free to contact client services with your questions. You'll see a number on the slide for U.S. and U.K. customer service. Additionally, please call client services if you need assistance in setting up a MyGDX account. We also offer complimentary appointments with our medical education specialists to answer questions related to our testing, including choosing the right test and reviewing patient test results. We'd like to encourage you to look for upcoming webinars on our website. Next month, we'll have Dr. Deanna Minnick speaking on diet and lifestyle strategies for detoxification SNPs. Thanks again, Dr. Chapman, for a great presentation, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar entitled Using the Elimination Diet in Clinical Practice, Explanations and Case Studies. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Kathleen O'Neil-Smith. My name is Christine Stube, and I am a medical education specialist at Genova's Asheville branch. I am going to serve as the moderator for today's webinar. We would like to welcome Dr. Kathleen O'Neil-Smith. Dr. O'Neil-Smith is a magna cum laude graduate of Boston University Medical School. She completed an internship in pathology at Massachusetts General Hospital, followed by an internship and residency in internal medicine at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. She has completed a 2-year fellowship in functional medicine through the American Academy of Anti-Aging and Regenerative Medicine, the subspecialty of bioidentical hormone therapy and primary disease prevention. She is trained in hormonal rebalancing and targeted amino acid therapies with neuroscience and has an extensive background in nutrition, applied physiology, and sports medicine. She has been on the faculty at Tufts University School of Medicine and Boston University School of Medicine. She competed as a member and later coach of the United States Women's National Rowing Team. She is a compassionate, innovative, and conscientious physician. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage all of our participants to let us know of any technical issue you are experiencing so we can try to assist you, as well as any clinical questions you have throughout the webinar. Please type these issues or questions into either the chat or questions boxes, making sure to send them to the organizer at any time during the webinar. We will be compiling your clinical questions and answering as many as we can in the final 15 minutes. One of the most common questions we get asked during the webinar is about the availability of this presentation and the slide deck. These materials will be available on our website within a week of the webinar. If you're interested in having these resources, please click on the Learn Now link on the homepage where you'll find access to our webinars, or you can also log in to find the webinars in your MyGDX account. If you do not have a MyGDX account, please click on the Getting Started link on our homepage. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. O'Neil-Smith, and you should be good to go there.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really excited to share with you my experience on the elimination diet and how I use it in clinical practice. So I've chosen 6 case studies that we'll review at the end, and that's going to be one of the most important parts of the presentation, as well as your questions that I'd love to answer at the end. So I'm going to go a little bit more speedily through the beginning to try to kind of give you a few nuts and bolts, but use the case studies as the examples. So the slide deck is available to you. You can review it at any point in time and go through the basics of it. There's great other support guides available through Genova, so you can always go back to that, but the case studies will be the most important part that I'm sure you'll want to understand, and then also having your questions answered, which I'll be happy to do. So hopefully you can all see the slides. I'm going to start now, and this is the first slide, using elimination deck in clinical practice, explanations and case studies. These are our objectives, help you become a little more familiar with ICG-mediated food testing and the indications for ordering it and how you'll use it. We'll review the 6 case histories and talk about my treatment plan, and I use it in, actually, most every patient gets a food antibody panel when they come to see me, because I think it's quite helpful. And these are some of the symptoms, IBS, bloating, headache, etc., that we can use to help us treat with the food antibody panel. And we'll learn a little bit about additional testing. We'll see in some of the case studies that I did do additional testing that helped me and can help you in addressing gut health and healing. So obviously, many of you have heard death begins in the colon. That's a common medical maxim. And as a practical application, I think when in doubt, we should look at the gut. And the gut does involve the mouth as well. The gums, the teeth, and the whole mouth, and the nares and the sinuses as well. They're all connected. So that encompasses part of the gut for me anytime I speak of the gut. And so I think also connecting these principles to functional medicine and identifying a mappable way to understand and emphasize the antecedent triggers and mediators of some of the symptoms that patients are dealing with so that we can help them very effectively get to the root cause as opposed to just band-aiding it over with a pill. And most of you have heard of the principles for restoring gastrointestinal health, whether it's the 4Rs or other companies and nutrient supplement-based companies have other principles for optimizing digestion, but we really need to know that digestion is working well, that we had a healthy mucosa and that we don't have a leaky gut, which everybody probably has a little bit of, that the immune system via the gut and the brain, the intestinal defense is working well, detoxification and elimination are working well, and that we have a healthy microbiome. So there are other ways of measuring that, which we won't talk about right now. We'll look at why use the food antibody assessment. So the incidence of food sensitivities has dramatically increased over the years, and it's estimated that about 20% of the population have adverse reactions to foods. My clinical experience is bigger than this, and I would imagine that yours is too. And then the question is how do we identify what are pertinent, what are relevant food antibodies? The IgG food antibody testing, that's the primary one that we're going to be really discussing and helping you understand how to use, tests and screens for foods that can be associated with the patient's symptoms. And food elimination diets based on this IgG testing have been found to improve patient outcomes by more than 25% in studies than just an elimination diet alone. And my experience on that is bigger as well. You'll see in one of the case studies that just using the IgG food antibody testing was quite dramatic for improving this delicious patient's profile and her symptomatology. So really big. Let's see, why doesn't it go ahead? Oh, there we go. Okay, so food antibody assessment. This is what it looks like. Many of you have probably seen it. This is one of the front page of the IgG panel, looking at a variety of different categories: dairy, fruit, veggies, fish, poultry, meat, nuts, grains, miscellaneous, with the IgE down at the bottom. Clear and green, I don't pay much attention to unless the patient tells me they have a symptom to it. Anything yellow, pink, or red, I pay a little bit of attention to, and we'll see that in the case studies. So this is the IgG, and you can see the key at the bottom. The IgE looks like this, really, really important. I found that to be essential, important in helping people understand some of the things, and you'll see that in case number 6 when we go through that as well. And then the final part of the testing that I like to look at is the celiac testing and the gluten sensitivity testing, so that I can not randomly off the cuff make a population-based recommendation that somebody get rid of gluten or think that they have celiac, but use biomarkers to guide me into really saying things, giving people effective and clinically based recommendations. So that's that page. So I find allergy antibody profiles to be invaluable as a starting point for making dietary recommendations. I like to look at the IgE-mediated reactions through the blood. In addition to skin scratch testing, most of my patients will have had some, and looking at the entire panel of the IgE through this testing has really, really benefited my patients in dramatic ways. IgG-mediated reactions are looking at the relative levels of the IgG antibodies via the ELISA technology. So just to quickly review IgE-mediated, those are the classic allergies. Everybody's heard of those. They're immediate. The circulating half-life is 1 to 2 days. They are permanent. They stimulate a histamine response. This testing includes foods, inhalants, and molds. They can occur from relatively few exposures to a food, or they can be generated due to increased exposure to a food, and they can become worse over time. So they can go in any direction, and that's really important to understand. And when we get to the case studies, we'll review that as well. The IgG-mediated immune response can have a delayed onset with a circulating half-life of IgG reactivity of 21 days. It's generally a temporary type of sensitivity depending upon total antigenic load, which we'll get into a little bit later. It stimulates the histamine release as well and activates complement, and the testing includes foods, herbs, and spices. It is dependent on the frequency and the exposure to foods. So one clinical pro that I think is really, really important is that testing food antibodies, IgE and IgG, is just one component of understanding the total antigenic load that the patient is exposed to related to food and environmental sensitivities. And these are associated with a wide range of medical conditions and symptoms that affect virtually any part of the body. So the IgE antibody assessment offers quantitative IgE levels to the most common types of dietary allergens, as well as the regional, whatever part of the country you're living in, inhalants and molds. And the IgG antibody assessment provides IgG antibody levels to 87 foods, including vegetables and spices. As a clinical pro, when I measure a food antibody panel on the patient, separately, I also have to check their total IgG, IgM, IgA. I want to understand, and oftentimes I get subcomponents of IgG when I do it on a Quest blood draw or lab or other blood draw, to understand what is their baseline, how strong is their baseline immune system? Or is it weak or suppressed? I need to know that in using the food antibody panel. So that's really important because it helps me know what's going on with respect to the body's ability to handle a total antigenic load as well. So pretty key. Understanding the food antibody report. The report will provide information on two types of activated allergy, IgE, and immune responses to specific foods. It's important to note, and you'll see this in the case studies, that the degree of clinical symptoms may not directly correlate with the level of circulating antibodies. So a low concentration of IgG antibody can be associated with a strong reaction. And a high concentration of IgG antibody can be present despite few symptoms. And we'll see that in a couple of case studies. And I see that commonly. I typically believe the patient. I make my recommendation based on what the patient is telling me, and then we go from there. But at least I have a trial and error approach, which I think is better based on biomarkers, as opposed to a hit or miss approach, which can be very frustrating for the patient. Okay, IgG-mediated sensitivities. They can be difficult to recognize because the reactions can occur hours or days after the food is eaten. So it can be really difficult to connect the food with the symptom. The response to any food can come and go in cycles, depending on whether the food is eaten or avoided, the frequency of the food, etc. Generally, they result from eating too much of a particular food too frequently. Again, IgG, not the classic allergy. The symptoms and the conditions that can be profoundly influenced if we measure this IgG response can be acne, ADD, anxiety, asthma, joint pain, bloating, celiac disease, colitis, ear infections, headache, IBS, insomnia, joint pain. So all of those things are symptoms that can result from a big antigenic load, which will include elevated IgG antibodies. So it's important just to have more of an understanding via biomarkers of this. It's also good to know that it can take 3 to 9 months for the antibody level to a particular food, for IgG, for that to decrease significantly. So we have to be patient, and it gives us a little bit of a sense of what to know, what to follow, and what to tell the patient. For the IgE-mediated, these are classic allergies. There's an immediate response. It occurs within minutes of eating the food. The reaction is usually linked. It's pretty obvious. Peanuts, shellfish, strawberries. Once the food has caused an IgE response, it is considered permanent, an allergy for life. And these foods need to be avoided permanently, even if the antibody levels are not elevated on the testing. Yesterday, I had a mother come in. She had had a 4 or 5-year-old son several years ago tested. He had an IgE that was pretty solid several years ago to eggs. She told me he's no longer got that IgE response. He was told by his PCP, don't worry about an EpiPen, don't have one around, he can eat eggs. And I said to her, that is not true. He may have a low level of response or even no response. She's eliminated eggs from his diet for several years, but if he adds those back at any point in time, he may be susceptible to a response, and that is important for her to know. So that's another little case in point. If there's a known IgE food allergy from previous testing, and the food has been entirely eliminated from the diet, the results can be negative. And that basically is a means of testing. It's like testing your blood pressure medicine. Does the medicine work? Is the blood pressure better? Yes. If you've eliminated it for 2 years and you have a negative result on IgE, yes. Will it always be negative? Not necessarily. It's a little confusing, but the more that you do these tests, and I've been doing them for over 10 years, the more you feel comfortable with recommendations. But you can never harm a patient by having them eliminate food. So that's a good thing about it. And the IgE, as opposed to the IgG, the antibody levels to a particular food will drop significantly more quickly when the food is, like within weeks, when the food is avoided. As soon as the food is consumed again, typically the IgE antibody levels increase. So factors to be considered that impact whether or not a patient has symptoms and the severity of those symptoms. Again, really key component is the total load of metabolic and inflammatory stressors on the immune system and the ability of the immune system, how strong or suppressed is the immune system to produce antibodies. That's really important. The ability of the intestinal wall, do you have a healthy intestinal mucosa to act as an effective barrier to food antigens so they don't readily pass through into the body? An important consideration, when there is an elevated IgG for a food, so you get a test back, high IgG, let's pick string beans, but the person doesn't have, let's pick string beans as red for IgG. The person doesn't have any symptoms to that food that they can relate. It may be that the immune system is strong. That's why I measure the IgGs and the IgM total levels independently at the same time as doing this test, because I want to understand how strong is the immune system. The body may be able to neutralize the reaction before the symptoms occur, and that goes back to the concept of total antigenic load. It's also important that there may be hidden sources. So a person may have symptoms where the IgG levels are low. There could be hidden sources. So, for example, somebody could be taking a calcium supplement that could be derived from oyster shell. And that can cause a positive antigenic response, even though you don't eat oysters. So you may see a response to oysters, you don't eat oysters, and and it may be that you've got a supplement that has that in it. So it's important to be looking and checking for ingredient labels on food supplements to identify potentially hidden sources of common food allergens. And common food allergens are wheat, soybean, egg, and milk. Some of the support guides have great lists from Genova, etc., have great lists of hidden sources, where to look for them, where to find them, and they're really helpful, and I give them to my patients all the time so that they can understand what immune reactions can happen as a result of hidden sources of common food allergies in cow, egg, soybean, wheat, miscellaneous. And I also give them a list of non-immune mediated reactions to foods and possible symptoms that will occur, like MSG, headache, atrial tension, sweating, hypoglycemia, and what kind of things can happen with certain foods. So it's really important to be looking at other things and understand those. You can start simple. You will never hurt anybody just by looking at the levels, talking to the patient, seeing if the symptoms correlate, and attempting a food rotation diet. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So what if the test shows low levels to a food that elicits a response, a noticeable response in the patient, while the immune system may be weak or suppressed, and it may be unable to produce antibodies? So that's important to treat. The food may have been eliminated for a while. So, somebody may have already eliminated, the levels are low, but the patient knows, I get symptoms when I eat that. The symptom could be due to just an additive or a contaminant that's within the food. Or a food-related symptom, as I just said, may not be mediated by IgE or IgG, but by a non-immune-mediated reaction, like lactose lactase deficiency or MSG. And that's important to recognize as well. So you open up your tool bag, you create a bigger tool bag. But generally speaking, if you just take it as a basic when you're starting, like I did years ago, I kept it very simple, very basic. You get your panels back, your IgE and your IgG food panels. And for IgE food allergies and IgG, you look at the symptoms and you attempt to remove offending foods. For IgE, permanent removal of that food from the diet. For IgG, if it's pink or red, you eliminate the food for 3 to 6 months. You can pick, then you reintroduce. And as you're reintroducing, doing a 4-day rotation diet to minimize the sensitivity is really important. So in other words, remember with IgG, it's frequency and the amount of the food that will elevate IgG responses. It's also total antigenic load. So you've got to be looking at other components of the immune system. Some typical supplements that can assist the patient are vitamin C, antioxidant, quercetin, antioxidant, fish oil. They will decrease inflammation and active antioxidants. So those are beneficial just in general. And I just gathered those just for some little tidbits that you can use that can be helpful. So how about celiac and gluten sensitivity? I include this on everybody as well. I've assumed in the past that symptoms, I've understood what symptoms meant many, many times when I first started in functional medicine and regenerative medicine. And I found that the testing didn't always correlate with what I thought. So I was wrong a lot. I learned, okay, well, don't guess. Let the data show you what's going on internally in the system. And if it makes sense, believe it and try to act on that in addition to correlating with the patient's symptoms. And if it doesn't make sense, repeat the testing and see. And then if you'll understand whether the testing was erroneous or not. But testing for celiac disease, for me, is always part of the conventional workup. Every patient I have has some gut symptom or some symptom that can be related to the gut. So treatment may involve eliminating gluten from the diet. And here you can see you get a total IgA. I appreciate that and value that. You get the typical testing for the anti-TGG, the anti-GGP, anti-endometrial, anti-gliadin, IgA, and IgG. And typically, in my experience, I predominantly do not find celiac positive, though I do have celiac patients. Most of the patients have a gluten sensitivity, as denoted by the positive anti-gliadin, IgA, and IgG, and they have relative levels of positivity, weak to strong, and based on their preferences, we go about coming up with a plan for them dietarily. So with celiac, we permanently remove gluten from the diet to the best of our ability. With gluten sensitivity, we eliminate gluten and we reintroduce and monitor for symptoms after a time period. So we're going to go into the case studies. We're going to have lots of time for questions. So my first case is a 19-year-old sophomore at Tulane, and some of these are recent and some of them are old. He's a young guy. He came in because he wasn't feeling well as much as a patient in my practice. And he was fabulous. He said, I feel tired, I feel anxious. Whenever I eat, I get stomach aches. If I don't eat, I don't get a stomach ache. I have headaches. And since being at Tulane, he's from Boston otherwise, I have new allergies. I've now got an inhaler, albuterol MDI. When I'm at school, I take Adderall extended release as needed, and if I take the immediate release, I get more anxiety. Zyrtec 2 to 3 times per week, more at school than at home. It's an Advil, and he prefers marijuana most days because that decreases his anxiety. So I had no idea what we were going to find on this young man. So we did a food antibody testing. We did a series of testing, but this was really, really helpful. I reviewed this with him relatively recently. He came in over the summer, and he had very common sensitivity responses. He had responses to dairy that were not, they were in the yellow. They were not pink or red. I look at yellow as smoke. I look at pink as a 2-alarm fire. I look at red as a 5-alarm fire. So that's just kind of my way of looking at it. So for this boy, he has a small reaction to dairy, but many types of dairy. So as a total antigenic load, the more dairy he eats, the more likely his symptoms may be exacerbated with food. no immune system response to fruits, pardon me, no immune system response to vegetables, fish, shellfish, poultry, meats, and 5 alarm fire to gluten, wheat, and wheat. So those are relatively significant. They're not permanent. They will come and go based on his diet. He's in college. Luckily, this year he's living as his mother said, he's living in an apartment. He has a kitchen. He can do a lot of his own cooking. And I reviewed this with him, and he was really excited to know. Another thing of note on this testing is this total IgE of 23. That's relatively on the low side, considering that he's got allergies and other things going on. He's also living in a relatively kind of wet region, moldy region, things like that.